Welcome to the 17th episode of ScottCast, the podcast. Sitting here with Scott Brown. My name is Michael Clark. Thanks a lot for joining us, to our live listeners, to the people that are checking us out on the recording. We're glad you're here. You know, we've been getting a lot of questions into the financial planning practice, and it certainly seems like everything is a little bit different nowadays. I think we're kind of getting used to the virtual coffees, virtual happy hours. I even got invited to a virtual magic show today, believe it or not.
Isn't that redundant?
Yeah. And then I saw an ad on Facebook for virtual Zoom babysitting. I know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Because you can watch the toddler crawl across the room and out the door, but you can't do anything about it that I'm aware of.
So it is a different world out there. And so I thought we'd talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing, some of the questions we're getting. And I thought we'd start with doing a quick little kind of office update, because I hear that a lot. Well, how are you all doing, and what are you all doing with not only yourselves, but also staff?
Yeah, it's been, like anybody, it's been challenging. I've heard all kinds of approaches to this, and everybody's got a theory on what is right and what is wrong. And that's one of the things that I've tried to stay away from, is there's a right way to do this, because
sure,
best I know, we've never been through one of these before, at least in my lifetime. So you just do the best you can. And in our case, we are an essential business. But with that understood, with technology being what it is, we don't physically have to see people in order to do our jobs.
Right.
Markets certainly don't care whether we're in the office or not in the office, and what we can do on laptops and even on our telephones at this point is astounding, for me anyway. So the short answer to the question is that of the 20 some odd people in our Orlando office, we on average have 3 or 4 at a time. I'm there most days. I know you're downstairs most days, or have been. And then staff comes and goes as signatures are needed. If we need a wet signature, we need something. But really, we've done Zoom meetings pretty much once or twice a week. We've had Zoom interactions. I FaceTime with certain clients. There's just no limit to really what we can do. So there's no reason to really push our luck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Been seeing some interesting stats too, and I pulled a couple of them for today, because I feel like people are looking for investment opportunities as well, and also just kind of wondering, hey, with all these changes, is there an opportunity to, kind of snap up a deal? And so I put a couple stats together. One would be there were 90 million landlines in the U.S. that have been disconnected over the past 20 years.
I believe that.
So 90 million landlines. And then along the same lines, talking about a dramatic decrease, this has to do with TSA. So 95,000 travelers went through an airport, and it was a random day in April, but 95,000. A year before that, it was 2.6 million travelers. So we're like 95,000 per day in TSA. Now, a year ago, it was 2.6 million people, a decline of 96%. So it makes some sense that, hey, are there investments to be gained during this period? And like airlines, obviously.
That one doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't sound good, but is it a buying opportunity? Are there some industries that could be good buys during times like this?
Well, I mean, the obvious ones are technology, right? And we've had this discussion not only amongst ourselves in the office, but the national discussion for analysts and research people that we talk to. Essentially, technology has been the point that keeps coming up over and over again for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, technology is driving all of our interactions. We're in a room here with all kinds of technology. But the other part of it is that a lot of technology platforms, whether it's Netflix or it's Facebook or whatever it is, they have recurring revenue streams, meaning these are not new customers that they have to get. They already have a stream coming in, and it doesn't really affect their revenue stream if people aren't flying or they aren't buying retail items. So the technology, now having said that, a lot of people are going to rush out and think about, oh, what technology a lot of them are very expensive already. So like anything going forward, you want to evaluate where the opportunity is, but also understand just because Netflix and Facebook and companies like that, their earnings have not been dramatically affected, their price reflects that sometimes. So
Sure.
you still have to go through your due diligence process before you make a purchase there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been getting a lot of questions on 3 specific industries, and that has to do with cruise lines. Are those a good buy at this point? Airlines, I don't think those are going to go out of business.
Yeah.
And then the other one that's been in the news quite a bit, that's energy. Energy companies, I mean, we see it at the gas pump. Gas prices pretty much all-time lows.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I paid $1.69 for a gas. I kept looking at it. I'm like, that can't be right. But yeah, no, I mean, in those sectors in particular, airlines obviously is one that's struggling. Cruise, as you said, the cruise industry. Who knows? It will come back. It's just a matter of when. Vaccination obviously has a lot to do with that. The other one, energy that you mentioned. Yes, energy's a mess. We can't store oil. We're out of space. People aren't driving. I think I filled up my truck for the first time yesterday in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So that is an issue. We will use oil again for sure. It's just a matter of, is it 6 months or a year from now, and who's going to survive? A lot of these midstream companies that push oil from one part of the world to another are struggling. A lot of the companies that do fracking in the Dakotas are struggling. So really, it's a matter of first of all, there's some tremendous opportunities. But you have to pick the companies that are going to stay in business, right? And that's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on how quickly we get up and running for a lot of these companies as well. Because if this drags out for a lot longer, those struggling industries are going to have to burn through a bunch of cash. And if we can get up and running quick, well, then we're going to see quick recovery there. But if it's a little bit slower to get back to normal, it's going to be a rough go for really those 3 sectors. Again, cruise lines, airlines, and the energy sector.
Yeah, there's not an easy fix there. And again, picking the winners and losers is not as easy as it sounds. I mean, essentially what you're saying is a company like Chevron versus there's a company called NGL, which is a small driller. I mean, how do you know which one to buy? I think most people would say, well, the large balance sheet, too big to fail, however you want to describe it, deep pockets, for lack of a better way to put it, is probably the first place to look. A lot of these energy companies pay dividends, although obviously the further along this gets, the less likely they are to continue that dividend, at least at its present rate. So there's, again, there's opportunity, but your due diligence shouldn't be any different than it normally is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a little bit on TSA, how few people are going through TSA. The other one was on communication, just about landlines. 90 million landlines have been cut over the past 20 years. And do you think now's a good time to maybe selectively upgrade sections of your portfolio? I mean, I don't think we still have the typewriter manufacturer in the portfolio, but is now the time?
Hope not. Yeah.
Is now the time to maybe get rid of those? And again, I don't think a lot of people hold that, but the landlines, the typewriter manufacturers, is now the time?
Yeah, I mean, again, like anything, due diligence is important, but any outdated positions you have, and how do you know it's outdated, right? Like a company like BlackBerry, I mean, Motorola, are they still relevant? Sure. Has the company itself changed? Like a company like AT&T, you could say, well, people are cutting landlines, but AT&T's in the cellular business now.
Yeah.
They're laying fiber. They're in the TV business. Uverse or whatever it's called. They seem to call me once a week. So they haven't given up. So the point being is the company you're invested in, whether it's a Sprint or an AT&T in the communications world, are they moving forward? Are they rebuilding their platforms? Are they embracing new technologies? In the case of both AT&T and Sprint, I think the argument can be made, yes, they are, just how effectively.
Sure. Yeah, we're talking about things that we've noticed that have changed lately, and a lot of the common questions we're getting into the financial planning practice. Another big topic of, I would say, concern out there, and rightfully so, is unemployment. And along those lines, what if you have been separated from service or maybe even furloughed? Let's talk a little bit about some tips for retirement plans.
Yeah, so retirement plans is something we talk about a lot on this show. Is this a show? Yeah, it's a show. On this show. And nothing, again, none of the good habits we've been trying to reinforce should be changed at this point. Yes,
Right.
obviously, if you're not working, you can't contribute, and that's out of your control. But for starters, those that are still working, if it makes sense. Now, a lot of people have had their salaries cut and have issues with that. So, right now we're in survival mode. So nobody's going to judge you for cutting off your 401k for a little bit if it's affecting your ability to put groceries on the table. In terms of people who have been furloughed or and I guess more correctly laid off, those people do have options in their 401k as far as accessing cash, and you're clearly the expert in that area. In terms of rolling money over or leaving it in the plan, that's always a personal decision.
Sure.
Does it make sense? If I'm with a big company and I have really low fees, does it make more sense to leave the plan there? Maybe, but maybe you like the option of being able to buy individual stocks somewhere else. So again, that's never a simple answer. It always requires thoughtful research. But as far as withdrawing and supporting yourself out of assets that you currently have in a 401k, well, we know historically there are penalties for that, right? In light of current legislation due to the crisis we're in, I think you can shed some pretty good light on what people could do there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it has been an interesting thing because it's been, the IRS has had this 10% tax penalty forever for money withdrawn before age 59 and a half. They've pretty much always assessed a 10% tax penalty with a couple exceptions. However, this one, for anybody affected by COVID-19, they have released that 10% tax penalty. And it's a pretty vague definition, I would say. And not only have they released the 10% tax penalty for anybody under the age of 59 and a half, taxes are still due, that they're not going to let you fly on that.
Yeah.
Taxes are going to be due.
They still want their money.
But the penalty's waived, and on the taxes, you actually have a 3-year period to pay those to Uncle Sam. So we've seen some interesting moves by the IRS to really help people and give the people that are struggling right this second access to their retirement plan. And another interesting thing about, and we're talking about a special type of distribution called a coronavirus-related distribution. In fact, it even has an acronym. It's called a CRD.
Oh.
Because we don't have that many acronyms in our world or jargon.
Yeah. Well, if the government invented it, it has to have an acronym.
So it's called a CRD, coronavirus-related distribution. And if you do take one of those, you can even put it back in your account in a 3-year period. So there's a lot of interesting items that we haven't seen in the IRS code that are now available. So if you do have some questions on that, or you just want a sounding board to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, does this make sense for me? Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm here as a resource. You can shoot me an email. It's michael.clark@raymondjames.com. Scott is just scott.brown@raymondjames.com. But we are here as a resource if you have questions on that, or really anything we've talked about in this show. Feel free to shoot us an email, or you can always check out KieronPartners.com. Get more information about us, and also our contact information is up there. Don't forget to connect with us on Facebook. We're always posting videos and then helpful articles to help you plan, invest, and save for the future. This was ScottCast, the podcast, episode 17. Thanks a lot for joining us.